Power Producers Shop Talk, where we are refining and redefining the sales game by equipping you with the tools you need to differentiate yourself in the marketplace.
Listening to the podcast is only going to get you so far. Why not take your game to the next level? Check out Power Producer Basecamp on killingcommercial.com today.
Tactical skills that'll help you provide deliverable value to your clients and prospects.
Want to have the sweet swag that we send out from the Power Producers podcast for your clients and employees? Check out policyt.com today.
And action items that you can provide to take your prospects and clients to the next level.
Want to create an online presence but don't know how to start? Check out crushingcontent.com. It's done for you, so all you have to do is show up.
This is Power Producers Shop Talk, Production Redefined. Are you ready to feel the power?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Power Producers Shop Talk, where we are refining and redefining the sales game, and we're wrapping up with 4 of 4 with Mr. Zane Goldthorpe from ProWriters. If you haven't heard the last 3 weeks, go back and listen to them. We will make you a cyber evangelist, I promise, and if nothing else, at least challenge the way you think about it now. And along those lines, we wanted to wrap this session or series up by talking about something that every single one of us encounters every day, and that is the old cyber extension on the BOP or the commercial package, and why that is not the same as going out and getting a standalone cyber policy. Because I think, all right, people, I'm just going to call you out and say it the way I feel. I think some of you guys are lazy. In fact, I think a lot of you are, because you don't want to take the extra effort. The first group, who's the laziest, isn't bringing this up at all because you're weak and you're scared and you're afraid your client's going to leave you for doing what you're supposed to do. The second group is like, I'm going to talk about cyber, but I might be able to slide it in a little better if I use it as an extension on this BOP that I'm putting in place, or this cyber enhancement on a commercial package. That's weak too, because you're not really providing your client with the coverage they need that's appropriate for their business. And we're going to get into that. But then there's the all-stars, and I'd like to think that's the majority of you, but I'm not sure yet. You're going to have to prove me that you are by how many submissions Zane gets here over the course of the next 6 months after this series airs. And those are the people that understand that, you have to go and get a standalone cyber policy to have. I say bells and whistles. Bells and whistles are like extras. Those aren't extras, man. Those things are necessities at this point. There is no bell or whistle, but it's a big difference. And I think that a lot of the carriers that offer some level of cyber, it's interesting because you'll see that they'll offer an extension that you can, or an endorsement that you can put onto their more traditional lines, but they also offer monoline cyber, and those two policies are never equal. Their monoline offering is far more robust than what the extension is, or endorsement. But agents continue to sell cyber as an extension or endorsement because they feel like they're doing the right thing. I disagree.
Yeah, I disagree 100%. This is one of those topics I could go on all day about, because I have been on I'm on the flip side of having to see what happens when agents are selling cyber as part of their BOP. And what that looks like is phone calls, way too many phone calls from agents telling me my client had a loss. Usually it seems to be that it's a social engineering or invoice manipulation loss. A lot of times it can be 50, 75, or over $100,000. And they say, I had their cyber on a BOP, but now I'm finding out that it doesn't cover that. And I cannot tell you how many times I've taken those calls, and it's always hard for me to listen to, because I know, usually the call, you get it and you can feel the agent's heart just falling. Like, you can just hear them crushed, because and they're not just crushed, but they are also sitting there thinking, okay, I'm probably going to lose this client. And then nowadays it's also, I'm probably going to lose this client, and my agency's E&O is probably on the line. And so I see it all the time, and it just always, there's so many carriers out there just trying to, tack it on and get a little bit of extra money, but they don't know cyber and they're not offering anything, and they're just trying to get that little bit of extra premium. If we take, I've done a presentation, plenty of them before, where we take the BOP, an agent will send us the BOP endorsement that they're selling. We'll add it into our comparison, so it's side by side with the cyber carrier, and you would be absolutely, you'd fall out of your chair. Like, I think I've had agents who have sat there and said the problem they've had is be like, if I go in with the real quote, how do I explain to them what I've been selling them for these last few years? And it's like, I don't really know how to answer that because it's so bad. And so it's just one that you just can't do it. It just,
Well, I mean, look, man, you can spin pretty much anything. I think that if I was gonna in that situation, I would probably just go in and say something along the lines of, you've grown considerably over the last few years and what I initially had put in place, and I fear you're no longer the right size and shape for, and we need to move you into a monoline cyber policy at this point.
yeah,
That's a somewhat graceful way
yeah.
to not have them say, well, what are you talking about? You're the one who sold me this to begin with. I mean, what would have happened if we would have had a claim? And like, everybody wants to avoid that. But I think that if you're truly sitting down and counseling your clients and prospects to learn about their business, you can very nonchalantly move them over and just say, it's probably time for a monoline. And, coincidentally, if you're one of the agents that's selling the endorsement, every single one of your clients that has that just outgrew it at renewal. Fix it this year. Don't let it fester any more than it is. And I mean, that's one of the things we had talked about this even at Producers in Paradise. And I know some of the agencies have started to do it, but every single account, we should be looking at our book of business. We should be pulling our renewals well in advance, and we should be getting cyber quotes on every single one of them. Like, there's no reason not to do it. If you're set up with ProWriters, you've got a relationship, you've been binding business with them, they know you're serious, they know you're a true partner, they're going to make your life a whole lot easier and help you implement this by using some things outside of going in and manually getting every one of those quotes. They have the ability to help you there. And I'll save that. I'll let Zane talk about that if he wants to address that here, or you can reach out to him and I'm sure he'll fill you in on more. Even if you don't do that, if you're using virtual professionals, have them go into the portal and originate a cyber quote on every single one of your accounts well in advance of renewal so you can add it to your renewal proposal automatically. Like, just let them do that. It's a VA. It's not an expensive amount of labor for you to do. Worst case scenario is you get a rejection form that you offered it and they didn't buy it because they didn't feel like they needed it. That's it. Or the actual worst case scenario is they don't buy it and they have a claim. That's a worst case scenario for them. You got to make sure you have the rejection form. I've got to believe, and I don't have hard stats on this, but I've got to believe 50% of the people will buy just because you offered it and explained it to them. It may not be quite 50, but the reason people don't buy most of the time is because it was never offered.
Yep. It was never offered, or it just wasn't offered in the way that was, that they could fully, truly comprehend and understand. They went in with a BOP product and it offers next to nothing. And they didn't go in there with that full-fledged comparison that shows all of the line by line coverages. And I'll play, we've talked about in the last few months about agents leading with cyber, and we've had some agents who've started doing that. And one of the things I always teach agents about that is, your wedge in the door. If you use cyber as the wedge in the door, and the prospect you're calling on, if they're on a BOP, then it's game over. You're going to win, because we're going to tear that thing apart, and you're going to drive pure doubt in their mind, and you're likely going to win the cyber piece. But then the insured is going to think, well, what else did my agent miss? I need to have them look at my whole package. So if you're the agent selling the BOP, that's what the competition's coming. You don't want to be on the other side of the straw, because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, my two favorite things about ProWriters. One I already mentioned with being able to get a hold of people, but it kind of ties into that, and and getting like responses back. It is you will give you will give us the information, that ammo to go in and shred it to pieces, like you said. I mean, hey, give
So
me a couple talking points on their current policy with so and so versus what we're looking
yeah,
at here with Coalition or at Bay or whoever it is. I mean, I think that like the quote comparison sheet is fantastic. It's easy to read. It kind of narrows down the important stuff, and you're not going through line by line. If you could, if you wanted to, but you're highlighting the important things like the ransomware provision, and maybe a couple talking points, and boom. And
yeah.
Well,
those
yeah, I would say they're pretty much identical in most things. It's only about 5 to 7 line items. And in Zane, you see way more of these than I do, but I feel like
what the
usually it's like,
comparison?
yeah, on this comparison, it's
Yeah,
like 5 to 7 things and those are the ones you have to focus on.
yeah,
It's pay on behalf of versus reimbursement. What are the sublimits for social engineering? What are the sublimits for wire transfer fraud? What's the sublimits for invoice manipulation? And it's interesting because, and maybe this is actually, I'm asking you this question is a very selfish way for you to educate me, Zane, because I really don't know the answer to this. And I'm sure it's going to come up as a question at some point at the point of sale. I feel like there's a very close parallel between social engineering and invoice manipulation in
Yeah.
terms of how it's executed, delivered, and all of that. But for whatever the reason, and I'm sure you have the answer for this, invoice manipulation wasn't like I don't remember. Maybe I just overlooked it because it wasn't necessarily something in the forefront of our mind a couple years ago. I don't ever remember seeing that as a separate sublimit. I felt like maybe it fell under social engineering or something, but now I've noticed that social engineering sublimits are getting a little bit higher from where they used to be, but that invoice manipulation is staying the same or getting a little further down. And I'm wondering, did they break that out because they're realizing that invoice manipulation is really the aspect of social engineering that's driving this stuff? Or was there another reason that I'm not thinking of?
It's probably, if you go back and like I said earlier last week, it's the hackers drive the coverage changes. Well, social engineering was always traditionally that your bookkeeper gets that email where there's one
Right.
or two letters that are off telling them to send money to this location, and they fall for it and they accidentally send it to the wrong location, money on. Well, they could have caught that. That's something where it's like a human who's gone through training can catch that. So what the hackers started doing as businesses started doing more training and catching them at a higher rate, the hackers started finding ways that, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to actually get on your network and we're going to sit back for a few weeks and monitor, and we're going to see who you're doing business with. Then we're going to go in and we're going to take one of your actual real life invoices and we're going to just change the routing information on it. And then we're going to send an email out of your actual email account. So it's coming from an actual person with a real email, and it's going to have a real invoice that looks exactly like what is due, and it's going to go to the exact person we know is in charge of paying that. So all of a sudden now on the other side of the table, that person gets that. There's no possible way under any training whatsoever they could have the ability to know that this is fake. So they send the money off, it's gone. Then we start having the finger pointing, this and that. So we've seen a huge increase in that, and that's something that's driving. That's probably what's driving the invoice manipulation to kind of stay where it is, because there's been big losses coming from it, and that is one of the coverages. I'll say I've seen a few when we talk about the BOP and the extension. I've seen a few that maybe have a little bit of social engineering in it, but they generally never have the invoice manipulation.
and isn't that where they added in like the stipulation where you've got to pick up the phone and call somebody? And
No, so that was the callback provision that they started doing with social engineering.
okay,
You have a social engineering limit on your policy, but there's a callback provision where the carrier basically says if you didn't make an alternative way of reaching out to verify,
Mhm.
then we won't cover you. And so they were trying to use that for a while, and I think there's carriers who still try to slide that in there, I believe.
Yeah,
So funny enough, callback provision, probably not a bad idea before paying large invoices too. Just, I mean, just to throw it out there.
Absolutely. It's the communication between two parties has got to get stronger because it's just part of the reality we live in now.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me too because everybody's susceptible to this. It's always the people who don't think that they're going to ever have it happen to them that let their guard down. We have a mutual client that is a fantastic client for me, has been my client for 20 years, that had a pretty nasty cyber claim around invoice manipulation. And based on what they do and the level of security that they have to have, you would have never in a million years thought they would be the one. Somehow, bad actor got into email. To your point, they camped out. Good God, it could have been for months. It might not even have been weeks. It might have been months. But they waited until the exact moment when my client was transitioning over from normal check payments to paying all of their payables via ACH.
Mm.
They caught it
Mm.
based on email communication, and they were on that thing like white on rice, man. They got them for, I figure after the forensic investigations and everything, about 1.2 million in the claim, I would have to guess. I know that the raw dollars that were sent to the wrong account were $750,000.
That's another good point to bring up between the difference in social engineering and invoice manipulation. In social engineering, there was not a breach involved. It was a human error. Somebody fell for a trick and voluntarily released funds.
Okay.
Now we got invoice manipulation where there has actually been a breach. So as soon as it's determined that there's been a breach, now you got to bring in the legal team. Now you got to bring in the forensics team. Now you got to go through the full cyber process, which gets very costly. And not to mention the third party who released the money, once they find out you were breached, they're basically saying, we are out. We owed you the money. We got an invoice from you. We paid it. You were breached. Your problem. These claims get nasty. They get very nasty.
Yeah. And, here's a question. I actually had this question. I was talking to you know that I work with some Department of Defense contractors, and I was talking with a guy that's a prospect this week. I've been calling on this company for like 5 or 6 years, and he asked me a pretty interesting question because they handle a lot of data that's classified, like government classified stuff, right? So if I'm building something to government specifications for the military or whatever else, I mean, that's highly protected stuff. And the question that was asked, and by the way, what blows my mind is how many of those companies don't buy cyber at all, even though it's crazy because the prime contractors all require them to have like crazy limits, but then they negotiate their way out of it and don't buy it. But the question was, if you've got a team member who's working with classified information and somehow that information gets spilled out of the secure environment into other machines in the company, no breach, no outside person comes in, but maybe people who work in production or engineering or whatever that don't have security clearance, this information gets on their machine, and there's a protocol that those machines have to be completely wiped clean, destroyed, never used again. Does a cyber policy even respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where the cyber is going to have the security coverage for breaches, but it also has the privacy coverage for it's your duty to protect sensitive data, and that's non-breach related. So think about if you had an attorney walking through the airport with his briefcase filled with files, if he left that briefcase in the airport, that's not a security breach, but it's a privacy breach, and a cyber policy would pick that up. So that's something that I would think that if it led to a third party, if it led to a bunch of costs to have to correct it, that's something I would probably say should be covered.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
third party.
You're talking probably 50 laptops at any given time could have to be completely. So you get into a pretty hefty amount of money at that point, which is why they were asking. Not that they're going to be sloppy in their handling of any of this stuff, but I just thought it was a really good question. I had never been asked that specific
Yeah, it
scenario
doesn't.
before.
For a cyber claim, it does not have to be a actual breach involved. It's even just a privacy issue where data is just accidentally lost. I mean, it could be an employee accidentally sending an email with client files to the wrong location. That's not a breach.
There
So
were
so
two
that's
examples in this last CIC course that I took that were related to that. Like somebody's, why is that so funny?
I'm just laughing, man. It's a great Friday. I can fill you in offline. Probably not the best move for me to tell you why I'm laughing on the
Uh,
podcast right now.
well, anyways, it was basically, somebody was at like a Starbucks. They got up, went to the bathroom, and somebody, um, you know, pulled some info off the
yeah,
computer, and nobody had any knowledge of it, right? And then,
yep.
the other one was like laptop in the hotel, leaves the hotel, maid comes in or whoever and swipes the laptop and that. So it was an interesting,
I,
it was,
I got
yeah.
I got a good one as you bring that up, and I'm sitting here and I'm an Atlanta Falcon fan. Y'all are Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans, and we're about to face off. How about
Yeah.
the Atlanta Falcons this year with the son of one of the coaches who
Yeah.
pranks a player because he stole his phone number off his dad's laptop? I mean, talk about a privacy breach. I mean, that was freaking brutal.
Yeah. No, that was
As
ridiculous.
Atlanta Falcons fan, is kind of right along. It was kind of par for the course.
Yeah, but
Classic.
so here's the question: cyber policy cover if they get sued for that for
I
damages of
mean,
any
that'd
kind?
been a good one. I would have certainly thought that that's a direct privacy breach. I mean, it's a very good. That would have been interesting to see.
I think that's really a good point, though. I mean, when we think breach, I think we automatically assume it's a security breach where
Yeah.
somebody's infiltrated a system, and it's not. Like you can
No.
have a different multiple breaches by definition
Yeah.
as far as an exposure goes for your clients.
And just thinking, just close, talking, but we were talking about the BOP, and we're talking about breaches and claims that didn't involve a breach. Think about CrowdStrike. There's no that coverage absolutely is not on any BOP I've ever seen ever. The dependent system failure. CrowdStrike was not a breach and it shut down the world for a few hours. Had that been a few days, a few months, or weeks, it just cripples industry. And that wasn't even a breach. And all these businesses could have lost so much money from a business interruption standpoint. And that the BOP, I mean, it's laughable to even think about the BOP covering that.
Look, man, I mean, I joked about it in one of the other episodes, but like literally, I was in the Atlanta airport for
Yeah.
hours. Thank God I could get into a Sky Club because so I could at least like lay down or something. But we were me and my middle son Landon were coming back from Panama. We had been fishing in Central America, and we were loaded to the gills with tuna and other fish that we had caught in the belly of a plane. And we got into Atlanta from Panama City, Panama, to change planes. And our plane was supposed to take off at like 10:50, and it ended up getting pushed back to like one something or whatever. And so we go to there, we go down to the gate. We finally get on the plane. We're sitting there. We're on the plane as it's boarding for like an hour and a half. And the captain comes on between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning and says, "Hey, I really appreciate everybody's patience. Promise you that I really want to get you home. Tampa's home for me too. So I have no incentive to keep you here in Atlanta. Something's going on with the computer at the gate, and they're having a hard time getting the
Yeah.
last people on the plane. As soon as they get them on, we're going to be off." They get the people on the plane. The whole plane starts clapping and cheering. We push back to taxi to the runway. Captain comes on and says, "I got some really bad news. All air traffic has been grounded."
Yeah.
We're sitting in this plane at 3 o'clock in the morning and we have no idea what's going on or anything. I immediately go on to start trying to rebook. Nothing's working. So we get off the plane and they say, "You need to go, you need to go to, you need to stay here at the gate. Don't go anywhere because we're not sure how long this is going to be." So we hung at the gate for like an hour. And then I did what any responsible citizen does. I went to Twitter to get the most up-to-date news because they always have everything there faster than you're going to get it in the mainstream media. And I start seeing, oh, this is a problem.
Yeah.
This is something big.
This is real.
So I'm like, oh, I've been gone for a week. I'm going to go ahead and rent a car. I'll just drive the 7 hours to get home. Nope,
Yeah.
can't get into Enterprise to rent a car because their systems were affected too. So here's what's crazy. Landon and I stayed in the Sky Club for probably 6 hours. I got on a plane. We went to the gate. They said, sir, you're not on this plane. You're on the one at 1 o'clock. I'm like, no, I had a boarding pass for this one. They said, go down there. They might be able to fix it. I go to the other one. They said, they're not telling you the right thing. You're on the other one. Go get on the plane. You're a diamond with Delta. There's no reason they're not going to get you on. I went down and said, listen, they told me to tell you I'm a diamond, that you have a spot for me. There's no reason I'm not on that plane. They said, well, why didn't you tell us that the first time? I'm like, well, does it really matter? Like, does it really matter that much? Is that really, does the loyalty part, matter? Apparently it does. So we get on the plane, we fly home, and I told Landon, I'm like, just on a whim, let's go down to baggage claim and see if somehow miraculously all of the coolers of tuna that we had in our suitcases somehow made it to Tampa. I don't know. The sun, the moon, and all the stars must have been in alignment because the plane we got on for that 9 o'clock plane was the same plane we got off of the night before. They never unloaded the stuff. Ooh. All our bags were there, and our tuna was still rock solid when it got to Tampa. But I tell you the story because I'm thinking to myself, like, I was going to take personal damage. That was a lot of money worth of yellowfin tuna that we had caught, like probably a couple $1,000s worth by weight. Yeah. And we would have lost every bit of it. And I mean, I would have been pissed, man, if I would have, yes, it was fun to have the experience and go catch it, but I also brought it home for a reason. I wanted it. Yeah. And, you talk about the trickle down effect. It's just like, and that begs the question, where does the dependency stop?
We're so intertwined as business now that you have to understand, even if you're secure, all the partners you're working with may not be, and you can be affected by them. And that's just why this broad cyber policy is so critical versus anything else out there.
100%. Well, listen, man, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I really appreciate you joining us, people. Go to ProWritersINS.com. And if you want to talk to Zane directly, it's Zane, Zane Goldthorpe, the word gold, and Thorpe, like Jim, no E, Thorp, Goldthorpe, Zane.Goldthorpe at ProWritersINS.com. When you go to their website, you can register to do business with them, but I would also encourage you to check out ProWriters University, which is the educational program that Zane built and developed and continues to add to, that'll give you even more insight into the things that are happening in the world of cyber insurance as they're developing. So any parting words before we wrap this thing up, man?
No, great talking to you guys as always. We could go on for hours.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, everybody, we appreciate your attention. Stay tuned. We'll have somebody new on next week. We've given you 4 weeks of Zane, which is not nearly enough, but it's plenty to get you started and motivated to go out there and sell cyber. Have a great weekend. See ya.